Hello everyone, welcome to this section of your life processes chapter in year 10 CBSE, and this is on transportation in human and in animals. So I'm going to quickly take you through a few basic facts about transportation that are mentioned in your CBSE book. To begin with, it talks about some activity, and the activity wants you to go to the health center and to the veterinary center to find out hemoglobin levels of human being, adults, children, and also few animals. So I've taken those values here, and the activity asks you to find out what is the reason for difference in values for different age groups and even for gender, that is sex. So human adult male 13 to 17 grams per dl, females 12 to 15 grams per dl, so it's slightly less in females, and this is because of the hormonal reasons. Children level varies with age, such as at birth the level is very high because the child stays in mother's womb for 9 months and it has to sustain there to in a low oxygen situation, so it needs a higher hemoglobin to carry oxygen there, and it's equal in male and female at birth. And then the hemoglobin usually drops to as the child grows, it drops to about 11.5 and then gradually then recovers to 13 in children. In usually by preschool age it will recover to 13, and adults will normally have more than 13, but some females will have 12 to 15. In India, these values are normally quite low because of the nutrition and various other reasons for anemia, which we will quickly look at in the coming few minutes. In animals, calves have 10.5 gram per dl, cows 10 to 15 gram per dl, male buffalo 12.5 to 14.5 gram per dl, female buffalo is 11.5 to 13.5 gram per dl. So hemoglobin is affected by environment such as high altitude, such as in Himalayas or in other mountain regions. The hemoglobin will be high because there is a low oxygen level in the air, so they need higher hemoglobin to carry more oxygen in their blood. Diet, gender, infections, chronic diseases, cancers, and some genetic diseases affect hemoglobin levels as well. So let's have a look at causes of low hemoglobin level, that is anemia. So usually there'll be the most common type is iron deficiency anemia, more common in Indians, in vegetarians, those who have poor dietary conditions. B12 again in vegetarian diet. Folic acid deficiency, folate is folic acid deficiency, and then decreased blood production in the body. Blood production is called as hemopiosis, okay, and that takes place in the bone marrow, the cavity of the bones, long bones especially. The loss of blood, such as menstrual blood loss in females or other sources of blood loss, and destruction of red blood cells that usually takes place in some cancers, some blood cancers, and the problems with the spleen in the body. So this was the basic information about what the activity has asked you to do. Now we have seen in the previous section about transport of food, oxygen, waste material in the bodies. In higher classes we'll be learning more details about this, but at this stage you need to know few details about how the transport takes place in the body. So especially the transport in human and other animals is through the blood, and that blood usually is composed of plasma and the cells that are suspended in the plasma. The plasma is the liquid medium and the cells, they are of various types. So fluid medium is called plasma. Plasma transports food, carbon dioxide, nitrogenous waste products that are dissolved in the plasma. Oxygen is carried by the red blood cells. They are also known as erythrocytes. They carry oxygens, RBCs. Many other substances like salts are also transported by the blood, and there is a pump that pushes the blood through these blood vessels, that is heart, and the network of tubes that conducts the plasma and these red cells along with the different food products or products of respiration. These tubes, they form the vascular system of the body. So we're going to look at a little bit more details of these functions of the components of blood. The plasma constitutes 55% of the blood, and that contains proteins, minerals, vitamins in solution form, and it also has suspended blood cells. So red blood cells, they are 44% of the blood composition, and they have hemoglobin, which is responsible for carrying oxygen and to some extent carbon dioxide to various parts of the body. Now white blood cells are of 5 basic types: eosinophil, basophil, neutrophil, monocytes, lymphocytes. They constitute less than 1% of the blood volume, and they play important role in fighting against the diseases, allergic reactions, production of antibodies, recognition and destruction of the foreign proteins that are antigens. Okay, and the last cell type is platelet. It's less than 1%. It helps in blood clotting and preventing the bleeding. So these are different components of blood, and a quick revision. Now the next important topic is transportation pump in human beings and other animals, that is heart. So heart, you all know, is a muscular organ, and in human being it is as big as the fist, okay, our fist of the hand. And because both oxygen and carbon dioxide have to be transported by the blood, the heart has different chambers to prevent the mixing of oxygen rich blood on one side with the carbon dioxide containing blood on the other side. So there are different chambers in this heart. They prevent mixing of oxygenated blood, this on the left side of the heart, with non-oxygenated blood that has got more carbon dioxide. Okay, now the carbon dioxide rich blood has to reach the lungs for carbon to be removed, the CO2 to be expelled out, and oxygenated blood that comes from lungs to the left side of the heart into the left atrium and left ventricle has to be pumped out of the heart to the body. So it goes out of the heart through the aorta, and then aorta supplies through various branches and its network to the whole body. Okay, so we can follow this process step by step. So we'll just have a look through this diagram quickly, this circulation diagram. Okay, so oxygen, I'll show you that diagram in a couple of ways. But before that, let me show you the schematic diagram of the heart. So human heart has got 4 chambers, 2 atria, single atrium and plural atria. Okay, so right atrium, the blood from the whole body is brought to the right atrium from inferior vena cava and superior vena cava, and it is pumped into the right atrium. From right atrium, it enters into the right ventricle. Then from right ventricle, it goes to the lungs by pulmonary artery. From lungs, it is pumped back to the left atrium by pulmonary veins. So you can see the blood from body, the upper part of the body comes from superior vena cava, lower part of the body comes from inferior vena cava into the right atrium. The right atrial blood goes into the right ventricle, and the right ventricle blood then is pumped out of the pulmonary arteries to the lungs, and from lungs the blood comes to the left atrium through the 4 pulmonary veins. The 4 pulmonary veins enter into the left atrium. The blood from left atrium goes to left ventricle and is pumped out by a strong left ventricle into the aorta, and then it goes to the rest of the body, to the higher and lower parts of the body. So that's the schematic representation. Now let's have a look at how the circulation works. Okay, so for human circulation, the separation of right and the left side of the heart is useful to keep oxygenated and deoxygenated blood from mixing together, and this separation allows highly efficient supply of oxygen to the body, and this is useful in animals that have high energy needs, like birds and mammals that constantly use energy to maintain their body temperature. In animals that do not use energy for this purpose, the body temperature depends on the temperature of the environment, and such animals like amphibians or few of the reptiles have 3-chamber heart. So they have 3 chambers. So only human being has got 2-chamber heart, 4-chamber heart. So we've got 4 chambers, and I've explained you the circulation. Now some of the animals, because of the separation of the 2 circulations, the left and right sided, there is an efficient supply of oxygen, the maintenance of the temperature, and this is the double circulation. So there is a systemic circulation and there is a pulmonary circulation. So there's a double circulation, separate circulation of oxygenated and deoxygenated blood. So some animals will have a single circulation, and we'll have a look into it brief. So single circulation are 2 separate, let's have a look at double circulation first. So in double circulation, the blood is coming from systemic circulation into the heart, and then from lung again comes back into the heart, and they are kept separate here. So blood passes through the heart twice. So it's a double circulation, and this takes place even in animals that have got 3 chambers. So that the blood will pass through the heart twice. So there will, in 3-chamber heart, there will be some mixing of the blood, like in amphibians and reptiles, and that some mixing is tolerated because their temperature maintenance mechanism is different. The body temperature will depend on the temperature of the environment and not on the blood temperature. So some amount of mixing takes place. In human heart, there is no mixing normally. So this is a double circulation, 4-chamber, 3-chamber heart. In fish, the heart is only 2-chambered, and the heart pumps the blood to the gills, and there it is oxygenated, and then from there it flows to the body, rest of the body tissues, where the oxygen is utilized, the carbon dioxide is collected, and then the blood flows back to the heart again. So the blood only passes once through the heart during one circulation, whereas in 3 and 4-chamber hearts, it passes twice. First when it goes to the heart, pumped out of the heart to the lungs, and from lungs it comes back to heart again to be pumped out into the systemic circulation. So single and double heart. And now we've seen 2-chamber, 3-chamber and 4-chamber hearts in fish, in amphibians, and human and other vertebrates. So that's about how the blood is transported, and through the blood various food products, amino acids, glucose, salts, water, carbon dioxide, and also various waste products, nitrogenous waste products of metabolism are transported from one part of the body to the other. Now, very important concept in the medical field that you should be aware of, that is blood pressure. The force that pushes, that is exerted by the flowing blood against the wall of the vessel is called as blood pressure. So the blood is flowing through this vessel, and the force that it exerts on the walls of the vessel is called blood pressure. This is much greater in arteries than veins. Remember, artery carries blood away from heart to the tissue. Vein brings the blood back from tissue to the heart. The pressure of the blood inside the arteries during systole of the heart. So systole is when heart contracts, okay? Systole. So the pressure in the arteries during systole is called as systolic pressure, and the pressure in the artery during the diastole, so diastole is relaxation of the heart, is called as diastolic pressure. So there is a systolic pressure, there is a diastolic pressure. So there is a upper pressure and lower pressure, and normally in adults we take this as 120 over 80, and it is written as 120 over 80 millimeters of mercury. Okay. So this is the way of measuring the blood pressure using instrument called as sphygmomanometer. Okay, sphygmo, sphygmo, sphygmomanometer. Okay, so that's a blood pressure apparatus, and it measures the higher and the lower blood pressure. The high blood pressure is also high blood pressure than normal is called hypertension, and lower than normal is called hypotension. So hypertension and hypotension. So hyper is a high blood pressure, hypo is a low blood pressure. And remember, the upper blood pressure is called systolic blood pressure, lower blood pressure is called diastolic blood pressure. Now the normal range, as I said, is considered to be 120, below 120 and 80, and if it is increased higher, then it is called hypertension. So there are various stages of hypertension. The first stage is called elevated blood pressure. The second is called as stage 1. The third is stage 2, and the fourth is stage 3 or hypertensive crisis. So normal, elevated, stage 1 hypertension, stage 2 hypertension, stage 3 hypertension or hypertensive crisis. So that's the range. You don't need to remember these numbers, okay? These are important when someone goes for medicine. Now this was about the blood pressure. Now let us talk about the blood vessels. So these are the tubes that carry blood from one part to the other. They also carry the contents of the blood within them. And the arteries are vessels that carry blood from heart to tissues. Veins carry blood from tissues to the heart. The arteries have to sustain high pressure, and that's why they are thick and elastic. Okay, whereas the veins, they collect blood from various tissues and organs and they get it back to the heart. They do not need to be thick wall because they do not have high pressure in them. That's why they have thin wall and they have valves. Okay, they have valves in them. So what does the valve does? So valve stops the blood flow in the opposite direction. So when the blood is being collected from, say, leg, the valves will maintain the flow of blood from the legs to the heart. Okay, so you will see valves, they are thin, okay, and they have a large lumen, low pressure in the veins. Once the blood reaches the tissue, once the arteries reach the tissue, they divide into smaller and smaller vessels. So the blood goes to the smaller parts of the tissues and to the cells. The smallest vessel that is formed from division and subdivision of the artery that can supply up to the one cell is called as capillary. Okay, and exchange of material between the blood and the surrounding takes place across the thin single cell layer of capillary. So there is an exchange of material there. Then the capillaries join together and they form small veins, and the small veins join together to form big veins that carry blood away from tissue and organ to the heart. So that's how the system of tubes and blood vessels works. Now, little bit about platelets. Now, platelets are the type of cells that are there in the blood. We have seen that, and they constitute less than 1% of the volume of the blood. Now, when the blood vessel is injured and if it starts bleeding, naturally there will be a blood loss. But it can be minimized with the help, this leakage can be stopped with the help of platelets. So the platelets will form a clump, they will clot, and that clot will stop further bleeding. So the platelets help to maintain the pipeline of the cardiovascular system, and they stop excessive bleeding by forming a platelet clump or platelet clot. So this is a very important function, and if the platelets are less in number or if their function is not good, then that can lead to the excessive bleeding, and this can be a life-threatening condition. Okay, now little bit about the fluid which is similar to blood, but it is not exactly blood, that is called lymph. This is another type of fluid involved in transportation, and it is called as tissue fluid or lymph. Okay, remember, tissue fluid or lymph. Now, through the pores that are present in the walls of the capillaries, some amount of plasma, protein, and blood cells, they escape into the intercellular spaces. So this is artery, divides into smaller arteries and then capillaries. So some fluid will escape into the space between the tissue. Okay, so that fluid will contain proteins, that will contain some blood cells and plasma. So this intercellular space will have a fluid that is called as tissue fluid or lymph. Now it cannot stay there, otherwise your body will swell up. So that lymph needs to be carried away from the tissue to the heart. So this is similar to plasma, but it is colorless, it has less proteins. Now it is drained by the lymphatic vessels. Okay, it is not drained by capillaries and veins, it is drained by these lymphatic vessels that give rise to the lymphatic system in the body. So lymph carries this leftover tissue fluid that has got proteins, blood cells, plasma through the lymphatic blood vessels, and eventually that is drained into the large veins in the upper part of the body. So lymph also carries digested food, okay, absorbed fat from intestines into the large veins, and that drains excess fluid from extracellular spaces, that leaks out of the capillaries into the extracellular spaces from the blood. So that's about lymph. That's about the transportation system in human and in animals. Now let's look into the transportation in plants. This is very important, and you have seen this already last year. Do you remember your transport system in the form of xylem and phloem? And we also saw earlier that plants take carbon dioxide from the stomata in the leaves, and they release oxygen. They take sunlight that, with the help of chlorophyll, generates the energy in the form of carbohydrates, releases water and oxygen. So oxygen is released outside, water released can go out of the stomata, it can be released in the form of evaporation, and the carbohydrate is in the form of sugar that is used or stored as a starch. Now This we have already seen, but the body needs other raw material for building of the plant bodies, and that is taken up by a separate mechanism. For plants, soil is the nearest and the richest source of the raw materials like nitrogen, phosphorus, and other minerals. The absorption of these substances occurs through the part that is in contact with soil. Okay, so that is root. So roots. If the distance between the soil containing organ and chlorophyll is small, then the energy and the raw material can be easily transported between different parts. Okay, but if the distance between the roots and the leaves is long, then simple diffusion process will not be sufficient to transfer raw material from the roots to the leaves and the energy and the food products from the leaves to the roots. Okay, so the proper system of transportation is needed. Okay, so we need a proper transportation system in plants. Now the transportation system needs energy, and we've seen this last year as well. Transportation system in the form of xylem that carries water from roots to the other body parts, and phloem that carries energy from the leaves to the other body parts. Okay, so energy need is different between different body designs. Plants do not move. Okay, they are stationary, so their bodies have a large proportion of dead cells in many tissues, and that is why they have a low energy need and can use relatively slow transport systems. So these are not like human blood vessels or animal blood vessels. These are quite slow transport systems, and the distance is important. As I've said, if it's a short, simple diffusion and less energy will be needed, whereas long distance will need more energy. Okay, so plant transport system will move energy stores from leaves and raw material from roots. Okay, and that transport system has two pathways that are constructed independently, organized. They are independent of each other, and this plant so this independent system, tube systems, channels, as we know, are xylem and phloem. Okay, so the xylem transports water and mineral from soil, and phloem transports products of photosynthesis from leaves where they are synthesized to the other body parts. That we have seen already. Now I want to take you to the more details of this transport of water. Okay, so xylem, as we know, has vessels and tracheids of the roots, stems, and leaves. These are interconnected to form a continuous system of water conducting channel that reaches all the body parts of the plant. At the roots, the cells are in contact with the soil. Okay, and these creates a difference in the concentration of the ion between the root and the soil. So there is a concentration difference here. Okay, between the concentration of ions is different in soil and the roots. Water therefore is transported. It moves from the roots, from the soil into the root, to eliminate this difference in concentration of ions. This means that there is a steady movement of water into the root xylem. This creates a column of water. Okay, there is a column of water that is created for the steady movement of water to take place. and that water keeps moving upwards into the xylem to the highest point in the plant. Okay, so this is how water is transported from the roots to the other parts of the body. Now your book, CBSE book, wants you to do the activity. It wants you to take 2 pots with soil in them, same size pots. Okay, one has a plant and the second does not have the plant, but they want you to put a stick into this. So this is not a plant, this is just a stick. Okay, now they want you to cover these 2 pots with plastic sheet, so the moisture, whatever moisture is there, cannot escape by evaporation. Cover both sets, one with the plant and other with the stick, with plastic sheet, and place them in bright sunlight for half an hour. And they want you to observe the difference. And the difference after half an hour will be, you will have moisture accumulated from inside on this plastic sheet and no moisture in the second pot. So the plant has an adequate supply of water here. The water which is lost through the stomata is, water that is lost through the stomata is replaced by water that comes from the xylem system. Okay, so remember, water from root to the leaves. And the evaporation of the water that takes place from the other body parts, that creates a kind of suction. Okay, so water evaporates and that creates a suction for the water that is coming from the roots. So it pulls the water from the xylem cells of the roots. The loss of water in the form of vapor from the open parts of the plant is known as transpiration. Okay, so remember, this is important. So that transpiration loses water, and that loss creates a suction that pulls that suction pressure pulls the water from the roots up towards the higher body parts of the plant. Transpiration helps in absorption and upward movement of the water and minerals that are dissolved in the water from roots to the leaves. It also helps in temperature regulation for this plant. The effect of root pressure, okay, so the pressure that is developed in the root in the transport of water is more important at night. So root pressure is there during the day as well, but night it is more important, because during the day when stomata are open here, the transpiration will keep losing the water and that will pull the water up, but that will not take place during night. So during night the root pressure is more important to push this water, to drive this water in the upward direction. Okay, so root pressure is more important in night, remember that. Okay, now this is about transport of water. Now let's just have a look at transport of food and other substances in the plants. So we now consider the metabolic processes. Okay, now they are mainly related to photosynthesis in the plants. And what happens is, in the green parts of the plant we have a photosynthesis going on that produces the products of photosynthesis, and these are transported to other body parts, and that process is called as translocation. So the products of photosynthesis are transported from leaves through the vascular tissue to the other body parts, and it is called as translocation. And what is the vascular tissue that is used? It is called phloem. Okay, so what does the phloem transports? It transports amino acids, the other substances, sugars to the other body parts. These substances are delivered to the storage organs like roots, fruits, seeds, and growing organs. The translocation of food and other substances takes place in the sieve tubes with the help of adjacent companion cells in upward as well as downward direction. So this is the explanation of the translocation. So there is a sieve tube, okay, of the phloem, that is xylem conducting the water, the phloem conducting the food products, the metabolic products. The transportation takes place in the sieve tubes and the adjacent companion cells, okay, both upward and downward. Now the transport in xylem can be explained by physical forces, okay, by root pressure, suction, these forces, diffusion. They can explain the transport of water. But phloem translocation is achieved by using energy. So there is a use of energy in the transportation of phloem, okay. Now material like sucrose, okay, so have a look at this diagram. So there is a source cell and there is a sink cell, okay. The source where it is produced, the sugar, amino acid and other material, and sink cell where that is deficient, that is they lack this sugar, amino acid and other products of metabolite. So the food products, metabolic products, are translocated through phloem from source cell to the sink cell, okay, from source to sink. Remember this, and this is a translocation. Now this transport down. Now look at this sucrose molecule here. The sucrose is produced here in the source cell. It is stored there. It is transported out from the source cell into the sieve tube cell of phloem, and this is an active process. What is the meaning of active? It needs energy, it needs ATP molecule, okay. Remember, we have seen ATP molecule and energy production in nutrition section of this chapter. So sucrose comes out. Now because sucrose comes here, the osmotic pressure here increases. So the water from the surrounding xylem tissue is sucked here by osmosis. Now the pressure here increases because there is excess water. So that pressure pushes the whole fluid towards the sink cells. So from high pressure to the low pressure, the food products, metabolic products are carried. And now when it comes to the sink cell where there is less sucrose available, that sucrose is transported into the sink cell again by active process. That means by using ATP energy, okay. So the same process is explained here from source to sink. And remember, xylem, phloem sieve tubes and phloem companion cells. The source cell has got sucrose that is transported from source cell through the companion cells into the sieve tubes. Then water is sucked in by osmosis. The pressure increases. That pushes the food product towards the sink cell, and at the sink cell, sucrose again enters into the cell by active process, that is using energy. Now let us see a little bit more details of how this active process takes place. Now it's not in your syllabus, CBSE syllabus, but you might be interested in, because this will be there in your next year 11 and 12 year syllabus, and may be important for your entrance exams and for your knowledge as well. So this is the membrane of the cell. So if you look at this diagram, so imagine this membrane, okay, between the source cell and the sieve tube of the phloem, okay. So this membrane is here, okay. Now this has got a active transport mechanism that uses ATP to pump hydrogen ion outside against the gradient. So there is a high hydrogen here, there is a low hydrogen here, but still hydrogen is pushed from low concentration to high concentration by using ATP. Remember, in diffusion, the hydrogen will go from high concentration to the low concentration. So it is diffusing here, but it is pumped out using energy, okay, and it comes back again. So it pump out again using energy. So when it comes in, it pulls sucrose molecule inside, okay, inside the sieve tube cell. So that is how, using ATP energy, sucrose is transported through this mechanism, okay. So sucrose, that is sugar transport, is an active process, and water transport here is by osmosis. This is not active process, this doesn't use ATP, whereas sucrose transport is an active process. And this is how the food products are transported through the phloem from source to the sink, source to sink, okay, remember that. So that's the transport of the food products in the plants, and here it ends the transportation section of your life processes chapter. And I have done the last section as well, that is excretion, and it is available on the YouTube channel. You can access it there. So take care. I'll see you again in next chapters. Bye bye.